everyone. Welcome back to Hauntingly Yours. First off, a very happy new year to all of you. I hope you had an amazing 2024 and that 2025 brings you even more joy, success, and spooky stories to enjoy. I just want to take a moment to thank you all for the incredible support you've shown me. I started this channel back in late November, and honestly, the encouragement from you lot has been nothing short of amazing. It's been such a fantastic journey so far, and I genuinely hope to keep improving and living up to your expectations. Moving on to today's story. This one's written by a Reddit user, Intrepid past 5733, and let me tell you, I absolutely loved it. It's so unique, so fresh, and when I reached out to ask if I could narrate it, they were kind enough to give me the green light. They mentioned that it's only their second story, but after reading it, I have no doubt they're on track to create some truly amazing work in the future. I'd be honored to share more of their stories down the line. I've added their link in the description. Definitely check out their work and give them a follow if you enjoy this one. Now, let's get into the story. I've always known I was a bad person. Ever since the first time I visited the Red Wasteland, I've carried that understanding, and honestly, I don't care anymore. I'm a bad soul and a bad person, not a psychopath, mind you. I feel emotions, but they're muted, watered down by whatever condition you'd call this. If memory serves, my last trip to hell began with a hit and run. I was speeding down a quiet, rain-drenched road, fueled by booze and anger, ready to confront my girlfriend's dad. I didn't see the man on the crosswalk, at least, not until it was too late. His muffled scream barely registered over my truck's roaring engine and the pounding rain. Then came the sickening crack of his skull on the bumper and the wet splat as his body rolled under the wheels. I didn't care. I screamed a curse at the pedestrian and kept speeding. I never did learn his name, nor do I care to know. I did hear his death was almost instant, which I envy him for. My death, on the other hand, was slow and painful, and came 20 minutes later. The screech of my truck tires as I squealed onto her dad's driveway with my revolver in hand, banging on the door, yelling at her dad to give my Jenny back to me, and that I was better for her than he was. Turns out, the man had a 12-gauge shotgun, and when I kicked down the door, he unloaded a round into my chest. Honestly, thinking back on it now, fair play to the man. I have to give him some credit. When I appeared in a holding cell, I mumbled a curse, frustrated that my fun was over for the next few hundred years. I looked around at the other prisoners, a few tough-looking guys, and in the corner, a young boy, no older than 16, sobbing quietly. I should have felt pity, but I only felt a slight amusement. Life in hell had a way of numbing you. The holding cells aren't what you'd expect of hell. No fire, no brimstone, no demons with whips, just a cold, dark room with a single window emitting a faint red glow. Each cell holds up to 10 people, and there are at least 224 cells in total that I know of. The purpose of these cells is simple: hold you for a day, a week, maybe longer while you wait for your trial. Now, the trials are much like the ones you would see in the mortal realm. They have the judges, who are a council of 10 beings that run and control the entirety of hell. Those 10 beings are responsible for seeing how long you stay in hell. You are always guilty when you go to hell. You can always count on that. But there are ways to get your sentence reduced. You can either face the judges yourself and try to plead that you're a better person now, which rarely ever works, or you can make a deal with a defender, as they are called. They work almost as hell's lawyers, but do keep in mind the whole defender name is a lie. They are all devils looking to make deals. I would not recommend making a deal with one of them. I've tried a couple of times, a long time ago. I believe one of the lives, I was a terrorist. I was looking at 705 years, but he got it down to 20 years. But in exchange, I killed 22 people for him in my next life, so it wasn't worth it in the end. A few boring days passed. The other guys were next going on trial. The cell was empty for a day. Then a red-headed girl appeared. She looked to be in her 40s. I was asleep when she appeared, and I was startled awake by the scream of a curse coming from her. Then some banging on the walls. I didn't care. I proceeded to roll over in bed and face the wall, until I heard a few mumbled words escape her mouth. Of course, I end up dying like the last life. Now it's about time I talk about my condition, as I call it. You see, in the proper cycle, when a soul's human host dies, its next step depends on whether it has committed sins in its life. If the soul has sinned, it ends up in a holding cell, like I did. If not, the soul immediately inhabits a human body, usually around the age of 3. The soul is then supposed to forget everything about its past lives. Its memories are wiped clean when it enters a new human mind. But when you get to hell, you can always remember your past experiences there. However, you can only recall the life you just lived. This keeps most souls from going completely mad or becoming violent. I, however, am an exception. I remember everything. Too much exposure to humanity has stripped me of most of my empathy. My emotions are still there, just muted, dulled, after so many lifetimes spent doing terrible things, often just out of boredom. I sat up, narrowing my eyes at the woman across from me. What did you just say? Her head snapped toward me, her glare sharp enough to cut stone. None of your business. Her blood-stained suit and scarred face told stories I'd never hear, but her voice carried the weight of them all. No, you mentioned a past life, I said, my curiosity rising despite myself. I took a closer look at her, the dim red light from the barred window reflecting off her crimson hair. Her scars were a map of pain, faded and old, others fresh, still raw from whatever had ended her life. Before she could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the cell. A guard, his hulking frame barely fitting through the doorway, growled, "Robert Bradford." The horned man I've seen all too many times appeared, dragging me to my feet with a grip that left no room for resistance. I glanced back at the red-haired woman as I was forced out of the cell. Her smirk stopped me cold. "You'll remember this, won't you?" she said, her voice low but carrying an eerie confidence. I didn't get a chance to respond before the door slammed shut, but I knew I'd never forget her face, not the scars, not the eyes that seemed to see straight through me. The horned man shoved me forward, leading me down a maze of hallways lined with cell doors. The air was thick, the silence broken only by the occasional scream or groan from within the cells. Finally, we stopped in front of a towering oak door, easily 7 feet tall, It creaked open to reveal a massive chamber I knew all too well. Rows of seats stretched to the walls, filled with creatures no mortal should ever have to lay eyes on. At the far end of the room stood a raised booth where 10 figures loomed, their faces hidden beneath black leather cloaks. The judges, their presence was suffocating. Their voices, when they spoke, were deeper than the lowest notes of a grand piano, vibration that seemed to crawl into your bones and linger. My trial was quick. "Robert Bradford, how do you plead?" the tallest judge at the front said in a deep, firm tone. "Guilty," I muttered, still haunted by the red-haired woman's words. I would have usually made some snarky remark like, "Not guilty, Your Majesty, on the grounds of insanity." But truth was, I couldn't bring myself to say something like that. My mind was stuck on that girl, and the implication that there are more souls like mine. The judges didn't flinch. They passed the sentence without a second glance. 458 years for my life of sins, a footnote in their eternity. I was a terrible boyfriend to all the women I'd dated. And that hit and run was just the cherry on top. I was escorted out of the courtroom by 2 6-foot-tall horned bear creatures, topping red police uniforms with the word transport printed in gold on their uniforms. They shoved me into an orange jumpsuit and loaded me into the back of a semi-truck, a feeling I remember all too well from the many times before that I've been to hell. The ride is the same each time you and 20 to 50 other prisoners are trucked off to a prison. But the whole ride, I could not stop the thought, what if there are more like me? A thing to note about hell is it's not just one prison. There is a massive part of hell known to the prisoners as just the wastes. Rumors say it's about the size of the United States, with just over 7,000 prisons dotting the red-tinted desert wasteland. About an hour later, feeling the truck come to an abrupt halt, the doors swing open, blinding me with a red glow for a split second. When my eyes adjust, I see the familiar sight of 20 humans bearing horns on their heads. Also armed with electric batons, I still remember the scars those things leave. Being snapped out of the memory when one of the guards starts to uncuff me from the truck wall and cuff me onto the prisoner behind me. I also noticed the kid in the very back. He stopped sobbing, but his eyes were still bloodshot, even after an hour-long truck ride. I still hadn't noticed the redhead lady since the holding cell. I was hoping she would have been on that truck. Noticing a big 2227 painted on the orange brick wall of the entrance to the prison, thinking to myself that I had never seen that prison before. Being forced along by the horned guards, I noticed a familiar sight, a 2-story tall hallway with railings on the top, with cell after cell lining the walls. I heard screaming and banging coming from, I presume, down the hallway, but this part of the prison was mostly quiet, other than the screamers, which was a nice change compared to some of the other sentences I've served. When you arrive in hell, you appear in the form of your body, as it was at its most functional, not necessarily the condition it was in at the moment of death. For example, if someone was decapitated or had lost a limb before they died, they wouldn't show up in hell with those injuries. Instead, their body would be restored to a working state. So when I appeared in the holding cell, my body was completely intact, even though I hadn't been in perfect shape when I died. And you don't age in hell. You always stay the same age you die as, but you do require basic human needs: food, water, bathroom, etc. But if you die, you don't get reincarnated. You just reappear in a holding cell. But the person who killed you will also appear with you. There is a punishment for killing someone or killing yourself. When I finally got to my cell, I was bunked with a few other buff-looking guys. The next 458 years were mostly a blur like usual, but luckily Hell's prisons are much like the ones in the mortal realm. So, if you have lived lives like mine, you get used to prison. I spent the next 458 years doing what I always do in hell, existing. The days blurred into the nights, and the centuries passed without meaning. It was just another sentence, another cell, another string of faces I'd forget. But the red-haired woman, I never forgot her. Over the centuries, I've heard rumors that other prisoners have noticed patterns. Certain faces they swear they have seen before. Certain souls that seem the same. Sometimes they wonder if they're imagining it. But now, I wonder if I'm imagining it, and word travels in hell, even across prisons. Stories of people who always seem to know the guards' schedules, who don't seem to fear the judges. At first, I thought I was the only one causing these rumors and stories, but I know now that I'm not the only one causing them. But after meeting her, I knew I wasn't the only one. The red-haired woman. She said something that no one in hell, other than someone like me, should ever say. I wish I could have had more time to ask her questions, but I didn't. Thousands of years spent in hell, countless lives lived on earth, and she's the only one who might be like me, someone who remembers. Now, as I sit here, in yet another life, I can't shake the thought, what if there are more of us, more of me? For centuries, I've assumed I was the only one. Maybe I'm not. I'm putting this out into the void of the internet, hoping to find her or someone like me. But the truth is, maybe she's already found me. Maybe that smirk wasn't just a coincidence. Maybe she knows exactly where to find me. But if, by some slim chance, that red-haired woman ever listens to this, I need answers. And I think you know just where to find me.